Welcome, everyone, to the PFF Fantasy Podcast. I'm Jon Macri, and I am joined, as always, by the great Nic Bodiford. Nick, bye weeks have created a bit of a lineup nightmare for a lot of people this week with 6 teams on a bye. So we're going to try and help the good folks through it here. How are you feeling headed into week 12?
I'm feeling okay. The scheduling thing, I know they say they've got the magic formula. I don't see how people are benefiting from 2 weeks with 6 teams on bye, and no one's on bye next week. Is that right?
No. Yeah, nobody next week.
That's
6 weeks.
What are we doing? That's crazy.
It's nuts, man. And then you add in the whatever when we get to the Christmas week or whatever, they're going to play a game on Wednesday, or probably more than one game on Wednesday. So just an incredibly short week for the players too. It's the NFL's crazy, man. It's nuts.
It's so wild. I bet 10 years from now, these schedule issues are going to look like absolutely nothing. There's going to be 30 games in a year, and it's going to span 7 or 10 months or so. It's going to be great. Yeah. Anyway, and they're still going to be fighting for their second bye week.
Right. Of course.
It's and somehow 6 will still be in 1 week. Anyway, we have some QBs to talk about.
Yeah, we'll get into all of our players here, and yeah, man, it'll be an interesting week. We're a start-sit show, obviously, but when we get to these types of weeks, it sometimes feels harder to tell people to sit or avoid certain guys, right? Just because it might not be many better options available to you. So we'll highlight some players who we're lower on this week, but context obviously is important. And even if we're lower on them, it's totally possible you don't have better options. So just one of those weeks where we mostly have to make do with what we have. And that can include some of our sits this week, but we'll hopefully highlight some starts here that'll be able to help you fill those holes as well, because we're going to be going over our favorite QB and defensive special team streamers, wide receiver, cornerback matchups, wide receiver, man zone data, O-line, D-line matchup information, and then a couple picks from Nate's start sit article as well. And those are all in article form, and you can check them out on PFF right now with a PFF Plus subscription. So, Nick, let's get into it with our QB streamers of the week. And the first player you have here may be named Gino, but you're saying yes to the Seahawks QB in week 12.
Yeah, Seattle Seahawks, GS Smith facing the Arizona Cardinals. So this will be one where Seattle just has to keep up their pass-heavy, fast-paced ways. The Arizona passing offense ranks 7th in EPA per play and 1st in positive EPA rate. So Seattle, I know they all year they keep talking about how they want to run the ball more, be more efficient on the ground. They're just not going to get the opportunity in this one, and that's okay. Gino is playing very well. 13th in big time throw rate, 11th in turnover worthy play rate, 6th in completion rate, 12th in yards per passing attempt. He is also rushing very effectively. I think he's the type of quarterback where some of the more volatile stats show up and positively, and that's just because he's a sort of a smart scrambler, smart rusher. He doesn't force a lot of missed tackles. He doesn't drop his shoulder and necessarily blast through contact, but Smith ranks 14th in rushing attempts, 40 total, 7th in yards per rushing attempt, and ties for 6th in explosive run plays. Typically, we like to look at the tackles forced and yards after contact, but Gino's just this is what he does. He spots the lanes well. As for the defensive side of the ball, Arizona's pass defense, bottom 4 in a lot of these categories. 31st is pass defense specifically, 31st in success rate, 30th in PFF pass rush grade, 30th in pass rush win rate, 29th in quarterback pressure rate. Their run defense is also really nothing to write home about, 25th in average depth of tackle. They're getting their first or second round rookie D lineman back. I think it's Darius Robinson. He might be showing up here soon. They took him off injured reserve a couple weeks ago, but I don't think that even a high-end rookie defensive tackle is going to completely wholesale change things here. So anyway, I like Gino a lot this week as a QB1.
Yeah, for sure. It's a nice spot here for Geno Smith, and it's like you've laid out. It's a top 10 matchup here per like our strength of schedule tool and everything like that. So, the next name on the list is one that we've talked about a few times as a streaming option, including last week when he finished as a top 5 quarterback for the week. Nick, all we're trying to do is turn the people into Bo Leavers. So tell us about Broncos QB this week.
The Bo Believers. I'm a Bo Believer. So, Bo Nix, Denver Broncos rookie quarterback facing the Las Vegas Raiders. He is a little bit scary just because rookies are scary, especially guys who have to run the ball a lot. This is kind of like it's the same issues that people had emotionally with like Anthony Richardson, except Anthony Richardson's the most athletic guy of all time, and Bo Nix is not. But he's getting it done from a fantasy perspective. Ties for 16th in big time throws, second in turnover-worthy play rate, 13th in average depth of target, 17th in air yards percentage, which he's not like breaking the bank in those depth statistics, but he is throwing the ball downfield more than some might think, which is awesome. This is great to see. It's in-season development from this guy. Las Vegas, their defensive statistics, they're all in the piece. So go into it in depth here, and they're bad. But the thing that we really need to focus on is Wednesday's injury report came out yesterday, and all 3 starting cornerbacks showed up on the injury report. Actually, I have to go edit this because I only had 2 of these guys in there, but it's all 3. The most consequential would be Ja'Cory Bennett and Nate Hobbs. Jack Jones is kind of he's a volatile talent, volatile performer. But right now, all 3 of these guys should be considered highly questionable to start. If they are out, this is you better believe he can finish as like the QB1 overall. I'm not calling that, but the secondary is in a really bad state, and they're starting strong safety. He's been on injured reserve for weeks now, so could be facing a bad Raiders defense, who's also missing Christian Wilkins, without 4 of their 5 starting defensive backs. That's a big deal.
It's a huge deal. It's a huge deal. And part of the reason, why we liked him so much last week too, came from the advantage that offensive line provides him as far as being able to keep a clean pocket too. And I mean, when the matchup lines up again, like it did last week, it's almost impossible not to go back to the well for, putting Bo Nix on this list. I put him back in the O-line, D-line article as well. And yeah, the Broncos offensive line, for anybody that's been listening, I mean, 82.6 pass blocking grade. That's the second best mark in the league. They've allowed just a 15.2% pressure rate. That's the best mark in the league. Then you look at the Raiders, their defensive line, 63.7 pass rush grade. That ranks 25th, 28.6% pressure rate, third worst mark in the league. So Bo Nix, 84.4 passing grade when kept clean this season. That's tied with Josh Allen as the 11th best mark among quarterbacks. He's thrown 86% of his touchdown passes from a clean pocket. That's the second best among quarterbacks with at least 250 dropbacks. His 11 big-time throws are tied for the 4th most from a clean pocket, and his 1% turnover-worthy play rate is tied for the 7th best when kept clean. Again, we talked about the rushing ability. It continues to be a part of his game when he isn't pressured. He owns 17 total scrambles when kept clean. That's the most in the league. The Raiders also allowing the 8th most fantasy points per game to opposing quarterbacks and rank as the best overall matchup for quarterbacks, according to our strength of schedule tool. And those cornerbacks being banged up makes a big difference. So we do have a sit this week. And again, keeping in mind the context here, because you may not have other options, but Matthew Stafford, we talked about him on the Waiver Wire show this past week, and I knew it wasn't the best matchup for him this week, but thought maybe he could still be like a solid streaming play. After diving into the matchup a bit more, I'm less convinced that I'd like to be looking at him as a streamer. And again, 6 teams on a bye. He's someone who's widely available on most waiver wires, coming off a week where he threw 4 touchdowns, but the only real starting quarterbacks out this week are Joe Burrow and Josh Allen. The rest are streamers themselves. So it's not as bleak at quarterback as some of the other positions. And part of what really concerns me here is the disadvantage in the trenches. The Rams offensive line ranks just 30th in pass blocking grade. They've allowed an 11.9% knockdown rate. So that's sacks plus QB hits. That's the 3rd highest mark on the year. And you look at the Eagles defensive line, they've been really good. They have an 85.2 pass rush grade. That's second best. And their 25.1% quick pressure rate is a top 10 mark. So looking at Stafford, when he's under pressure this season, just a 29.9 passing grade. That ranks 36th at the position. And then he's also been responsible for 10 turnover-worthy plays when pressured, which is the second most among quarterbacks. So he's thrown 5 interceptions. That's tied for the third most, and just 2 touchdowns, which is tied for 25th when he is pressured. And only 15.4% of Stafford's passing touchdowns this year have come when under pressure, which is the 4th worst mark among quarterbacks with at least 250 dropbacks this season. The Eagles are allowing the 29th most fantasy points per game to the quarterback position on top of that. So just kind of a bad matchup all around here for Matthew Stafford. So if I am looking to avoid a quarterback, he might be one this week.
Yep, totally fair. Keep an eye on Rob Havenstein and Joe Noteboom's practice participation this week.
Yep. Okay, we'll get into the wide receivers in a second. I just want to give a shout out to BetterHelp. We're coming out of October, which we obviously know being Halloween, that is the season for wearing masks and costumes, but sometimes we feel like we might be wearing a mask and hide more often than we want to, whether it's at work and social settings around our family. So therapy can help you learn to accept all parts of yourself so you can take off the mask, because masks should be for Halloween fun, not for our emotions. Therapy can be really useful to get a better understanding of how your mind actually works and to become more aware of your own patterns of behavior and how to improve them. It's useful for everybody, not just people struggling with something specific. If you're thinking about starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. BetterHelp is a convenient, flexible, and entirely online way to get therapy that's right for you. You just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist, and you can switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. Visit betterhelp.com/PFFfantasy to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/PFFfantasy. All right, Nick, let's go into the wide receivers here. And we're going to go to your wide receiver cornerback matchup article, and we're going to start with the guys to target this week. Who is the first name on the list for you?
So first name on the list is tied to GES. This is Seattle Seahawks number 1, number 2 wide receiver, DK Metcalf, facing Arizona Cardinals cornerback Sean Murphy-Bunting. So Metcalf, he has not. Buda Baker seems to give him mental fits. I'm not really sure what the deal is here, because Metcalf's box scores have not been explosive against Arizona. But everything about this matchup seems to me to look like a must-start wide receiver 1 situation. Arizona, they're slowly phasing Sean Murphy-Bunting out of the lineup and getting rookie Max Melton, Green Bay Packers wide receiver, Bo Melton's relative, as I understand. They're getting Max Melton more and more reps. So it's currently a 3-player rotation on the perimeter. Fortunately, none of them are playing well. So even if he isn't taking a majority of snaps against Sean Murphy-Bunting, he will still have good opportunities elsewhere. I expect Metcalf to at least take a plurality of snaps against him, though. One note here, drawing from your field of expertise here, Arizona primarily uses a zone-based coverage scheme, and DK Metcalf's 23.1% target rate against zone coverage leads Seattle starting skill position players by 3.4%. He is the number 1 target earner against zone. Kind of thought that would be JSN, but it's not. It's Metcalf. JSN actually is crushing it against man, which is kind of cool. Anyway, DK Metcalf, what is he doing this year? Currently, 14th in target rate, 17th in yards per out run, 15th in deep target rate, 7th in contested catches. I really like those statistics in particular because I think he's going to be able to use his speed effectively against Sean Murphy-Bunting. And when he is clashing with this guy, they're Murphy-Bunting kind of a physical player. I think the DK Metcalf can get the job done there. Murphy-Bunting ranks 54th in open target rate, ties for dead last in catch rate allowed, and grades out as the worst player among 64 NFL cornerbacks with at least 175 perimeter coverage snaps. So this is a matchup to target.
Yeah, no, this is a good one. I put this one in the wide receiver man zone report as well for the reasons you said. The target rate, he's the clear leader in fantasy points per route run versus zone. Cardinals do play an above average rate of zone coverage, but they rank 25th in team coverage grade. They rank last in defensive success rate, and they rank 29th in first down plus touchdown rate allowed from zone coverages. So really like this matchup here for DK Metcalf to potentially get back into that top 20 range, potentially even higher here. So who else did you have in the wide receiver cornerback matchups to target?
So sticking with the theme of the worst guy at this one thing, we have Los Angeles Chargers perimeter receiver Quentin Johnston for the second week in a row facing Baltimore Ravens cornerback Brandon Stevens. These two guys take a majority of snaps lined up on the same side, opposite one another. So I think they're just going to go at it all day long. Stevens has allowed 17 explosive pass plays this season, ties for the most in the NFL. I believe that was with Cincinnati Bengals cornerback Cam Taylor-Britt, who is such a wild profile. Shuts guys down, like he messes with DK Metcalf just by jawing at him, but then just gets toasted. Anyway, so Quentin Johnston, he had a pretty good week. Yeah, so last 3 weeks, he's got a one wide receiver 1 finish and then 2 wide receiver 3 finishes. I think he definitely finishes as a wide receiver 3. Most likely gets into the wide receiver 2 ranks. What is he doing? He is, there we go. Yeah, so PFF's wide receiver cornerback matchup chart gives Johnston an excellent 88.7 receiving matchup advantage rating against Stevens, who, like I said, getting burned for explosive plays regularly. He ranks 46th in targeted rate, 47th in catch rate allowed, 58th in explosive pass play rate, 49th in success rate, and critically, 55th in missed tackles. This is a matchup to target for a physical player like DK Metcalf.
Yeah, it's a really nice matchup here. And I mean, for this Chargers passing offense as a whole, right? Like we're looking for any reason to gush about Justin Herbert here. I know you wrote up the Baltimore Ravens as a defense here to potentially go after in the funnel report, right? So whether it's Quentin Johnston, Justin Herbert, I mean, Ladd McConkey, I know the Ravens, they play a little bit more man coverage, and we've talked about Ladd McConkey's success against man, one of the best in the leagues in that regard. So yeah, please, if there's anything else on the Ravens defense here for people to exploit, let them know.
Yeah, I just like this one a lot. I appreciate it, you catching me on this, because I like to breeze right past this. But I really like the trenches matchup. The Chargers offensive line had some health issues at the tackle position earlier in the year, but that week 5 bye continues to pay dividends. They are healthy now. I think that they can stonewall the Ravens pass rush. As for the pass defense as a whole, Baltimore Ravens the 5th most yards per coverage snap, the 2nd highest explosive pass plays allowed rate. It's 87 explosive pass plays, or 16 more than the next closest team. Fire the cannons here for the LA Chargers.
Let's do it. All right, and then the last name on the wide receiver cornerback matchup piece to target. You went for one of the deeper picks here, but we're stacking with Bo Nix here. What do you like about Marvin Mims of the Denver Broncos this week?
Yeah, the Mimster. So Mims is facing Las Vegas Raiders, likely facing Las Vegas Raiders backup slot cornerback Darnay Holmes. Like I mentioned before, Jacorian Bennett, Nate Hobbs, these are the names that to really know here. But regardless, even if Hobbs suits up, I don't expect him to, but even if he does, Marvin Mims over the last 2 weeks has had really intriguing usage. I'm doing this off the top of my head, but I don't need to. I can't just look at my notes. Yeah, so over the last 2 weeks, Marvin Mims has logged 9 offensive snaps lined up in the slot, 6 lined up out wide, and 12 lined up in the backfield. On those 12 backfield snaps, he's seen 5 routes run against linebackers and or safeties. He's earned targets on 2 of those, which makes for a very high 40% target rate. He's also had 3 rushing attempts per game over the last 2 weeks. They have what it looks like is Sean Payton has Taysom Hill, but like a way, way, way faster version. Maybe one who is not yet throwing, touchdown passes on trick plays, but I think he found his guy that he can kind of use as just a regular offensive weapon. Remember, technically he lined up more as a wide receiver, but if we're just going by the individual pre-snap alignment spots, he lined up in the backfield over the last 2 weeks more than he has in the slot or out wide. Darnay Holmes, he's a guy who I used to target in the wide receiver cornerback matchup chart back when he was a starter a year or two ago. I think he was with the Giants. But he 44th in targeted rate, 34th in yards allowed per coverage snap, 33rd in explosive pass plays allowed rate. He has not yet forced an incompletion this season. He's earned a 49.6 PFF slot coverage grade, which ranks 64th among 71 NFL slot defensive backs with at least 49 slot coverage snaps. I like this matchup a lot.
Yeah, and that's fun usage to kind of keep an eye on as well there for Marvin Mims if it does continue here. I really like that shout out because I'll definitely be kind of watching for that and see what we can get because been waiting for Marvin Mims to make an impact here in the NFL and just haven't seen it yet. So maybe that's the role here where things can turn around. Okay, so Jauan Jennings is on my list this week. He's an obvious start, but like maybe one of my favorite wide receivers to target across the board for this entire week. And that scares me a little because I'm playing against him in some key matchups. But I can't let that get in the way of just how damn good he's been and how perfectly things might be lining up here for a monster game. It's starting with the 49ers advantage in the trenches, which really comes from the Packers just being really ineffective as a pass rush unit along their defensive line. The Packers defensive line has managed just a 58.4 pass rush grade. That's 29th and generated just a 32.8% pressure rate is 20th. 49ers offensive line has been above average pass blocking unit, 72.1 pass blocking grade, 25.8% pressure rate allowed. Those are average numbers, but it just, even being average creates a significant advantage against Green Bay here. And that's huge for Jennings because on non-pressure dropbacks, Jennings is earning an elite 33.1% target rate, which is not just the highest mark on the team among qualifying wide receivers and tight ends, but ranks as the 10th best mark in the entire league among 151 qualifiers who have run at least 90 routes at wide receiver and tight end. As a result, Jennings has managed 0.67 PPR points per route run in those situations, which is the 6th best mark among the same 151 qualifiers across both positions. His 3.72 yards per route run on non-pressure dropbacks is the best mark among the same 151 players. And he stood out on the wide receiver man zone report this week as well because the Packers have played zone and man coverages at average rates. They've earned a 73.6 team coverage grade from zone, which is 5th. That's not bad. Pretty good, actually. And then just a 51 team coverage grade from man, which is 26. So when you look at Jennings, he is the 49ers' most effective wide receiver versus man coverage. He ranks 22nd overall in fantasy points per route run against man, and he's earned a strong 25% target rate. He's, to me, I think obviously the best bet to exploit Green Bay's defense. He's also San Francisco's clear leader in fantasy points per route run versus zone, ranks 7th among all wide receivers in fantasy points per route run against zone coverage. So even if it's a tougher zone matchup, he still stands out as a positive bet here. Add to the fact that the 49ers wide receivers own the 4th best matchup according to our strength of schedule tool. Finished as wide receiver 7 last week in PPR. I think he has another shot to finish among the top 10 wide receivers again this week if he continues to dominate in these situations. So, Nick, I know you wrote about the 49ers and Packers in the run funnel report as well. So anything to add to help me back this up here for Jennings as a top play?
Yeah, so I looked at this, I covered this game for Roto World last week. One thing that stood out was Jauan Jennings earned, I think it was 6 targets on 3rd down and caught all 6. He was a monster. The dog's making an appearance. He's the go-to guy in the passing offense. Yeah. He is the 49ers' number 1 wide receiver. Even though I like this matchup a lot from a run funnel perspective, Jauan Jennings, very good bet to go get 8 targets. And especially with the bye weeks, like he's going to just kind of tumble into the back end wide receiver 1 ranks just because of what the role that he occupies and the team that he's on. Mm-hmm. As for the run funnel aspect, one thing that stands out to me, the Green Bay Packers, they are getting slammed in the yards after contact category, 25th in yards allowed after contact per rushing attempt, 3.1. I think a lot of that has to do with two factors. One, they have a really undersized linebacker core. I think it was 3 of 4 qualifying linebackers, so players with at least 115 run defense snaps. Where are you wine here? Green Bay is the only team in the NFL that has 4 linebackers who have logged at least 115 run defense snaps. 3 of those 4 weigh 230 pounds or less. The one guy who can kind of pack a thump at 241 is Quay Walker, and he is also perhaps the worst run defender in the group. Kyle Shanahan is going to want to get Christian McCaffrey going here. McCaffrey, I think he's finished as the RB11 and the RB13 in PPR scoring over the last 2 weeks. They want him. He's been fine. Like he's been pretty decent as a receiver. He's been fine as a rusher. I think this is one where they're going to want to kind of get back into their groove, let McCaffrey run wild. And I think that even if it's a run-heavy game script, Brock Purdy's still going to throw the ball 22, 25 times. I don't see any issues there for Jawan Jennings lighting it up, given that number of dropbacks.
Nice. Yeah. We were literally just talking about Quay Walker last night on the IDP preview, and how Packers Twitter seems to hate that guy because he's been such a poor run defender and misses a ton of tackles. So yeah, definitely something to attack there from a fantasy perspective. And then I do have one more start at wide receiver from the O-line D-line report, because I did want to put at least an extra start instead of a sit this week, just given the bye weeks and everything. And actually kind of stands out in the Man Zone report as well, because it's DeAndre Hopkins of the Kansas City Chiefs. So this is, again, like, since joining the Chiefs, he's only really had one big fantasy performance, but I think he could be in line for another one this week against the Carolina Panthers. And I'll start with the advantage in the trenches. The Chiefs offensive line has earned a 75.9 pass blocking grade that ranks 6th best. They've allowed just a 21.3% pressure rate. That's the 5th best mark. You look at Carolina's defensive line, they rank 32nd, aka dead last in pass rush grade, pressure rate, and quick pressure rate. So they're awful. They're the worst in the league. Since joining the team for DeAndre Hopkins on non-pressure dropbacks, he's seeing a very strong 25.8% target rate. That's the 2nd best mark on the team behind only Travis Kelce. He's also seen 15 catchable targets on non-pressure dropbacks since joining the team. He's caught all of them, led to 2 touchdowns, 134 yards. 0.58 fantasy points per route run on non-pressure dropbacks for the season. That's including his time in Tennessee. That's a top 20 mark. And his time with the Chiefs has actually yielded a higher average of 0.61 fantasy points per route run on non-pressure dropbacks. So he has an advantage there. He also has an advantage in the Man Zone report as well that stood out because he leads the Chiefs wide receivers in fantasy points per route run versus zone, ranks 31st among qualifying wide receivers in that regard. Panthers play zone at a top 10 rate, but they're 27th in yards allowed per reception. They're 30th in yards allowed per coverage snap. This is just a bad defense. So like the opportunity here for DeAndre Hopkins to get back on track.
Yeah, it's very funny to me that Jadeveon Clowney, who is basically like a mercenary pass rusher at this point, just goes from team to team every year making a bunch of money, that he hitched his wagon to this horrible team. I guess they may still be in contention for the playoffs, though, just because the NFC, right. It's so wild how conferences one year are very good, and then the next it's like, well, they're only good because there's 2 teams that are winning in the whole conference.
Yeah, it's brutal.
Anyway, yeah, so Jadeveon Clowney, just worth noting. I don't know. He's on the injury report with a knee injury. I don't know how long he's been managing that, but they may have an even softer time. Kansas City, that is, if he's not playing.
Yeah. And then before we go into the wide receiver Man Zone sits, you highlighted the one other matchup in the pass run funnel report, the Eagles and the Rams. What did you like about this group?
So this is tricky because I initially started the week wanting to ride up Devontae Smith, but his hamstring, I think it's bugging him more than maybe we're being led to believe. He was out there for a ton of snaps last week. But anyway, I scrapped him from the wide receiver cornerback matchup chart and instead just looked at this matchup as a whole. Philadelphia Eagles at Los Angeles Rams. It's a run and pass funnel matchup for me. The one strength of the Los Angeles Rams defense is their front seven. Their defensive line is playing very well. They turn it around basically following the week 6 bye. Here's the problem. The Philadelphia Eagles offensive line is as good as it gets. And when you are relying entirely on the defensive line to both stop the run and the pass, and most of your post week 6 bye successes are at least somewhat correlated to your soft strength of schedule, I think this could be sort of a, I'm only thinking of bad analogies here, but I think the Rams, I do like the defensive line. I'm not trying to be a hater, but I don't think it's maybe as good as they appear to be. And I think that the Philadelphia Eagles are going to be able to kind of bully them more than some may be expecting, thanks to the strength of their offensive line. It is a good defensive line, and I'm really excited about these young guys. But I think this week, Philadelphia kind of knocks them around a little bit. Their coverage grading and all that is not that great. And Philadelphia, just top to bottom, elite players. I think they're all going to get the job done, maybe except for Devontae Smith, though. We'll see. It'd be nice to get him out there. He's kind of just doing cardio, I think, at this point, though.
Yeah, it's too bad. But yeah, I mean, the Eagles offensive line, obviously Lane Johnson has been a rock all year, and then them getting back Jordan Mailata last week made a huge difference. Obviously they had Kirkland brand Lane Johnson on the other side, Fred Johnson, who was absolutely terrible at left tackle. So what a difference that makes there for their offensive line to protect Jalen Hurts. So I do have, I got 3 wide receiver starts here from the Man Zone report that I just want to quickly highlight. And the first one is Courtland Sutton of the Denver Broncos. So obviously we've been talking about Bo Nix, so we're going to talk about Courtland Sutton again as well. He's been much more efficient against man coverage this season, 25% target rate against man. It's really a great matchup for him specifically. You mentioned the cornerback issues with the Raiders. The Raiders play man and zone coverages at league average rates, but they rank 30th in team coverage grade while in zone, 25th while in man. Like, again, this secondary has been really, really poor for the Raiders. Bo Nix, Courtland Sutton, potentially Marvin Mims. We like that one to kind of go off here. So Courtland Sutton stands out. Christian Watson of the Green Bay Packers also stands out. He's coming off the best receiving game of the season, his best receiving game of the season in week 11. He ranks tied for 17th in fantasy points per route run, while commanding an elite 31% target rate versus man coverage this season. The 49ers have played man and zone coverages at league average rates this season, but their weakness is in man coverage. The defense ranks bottom 5 in explosive play rate allowed, yards per target, and yards per coverage snap allowed while in man coverage. So Christian Watson just kind of stood out to me as like a potential deeper league option / bye week fill-in this week. And then Terry McLaurin, he's been, I mean, this feels obvious as well, but coming off a week where, you know, he had a pretty quiet game on Thursday Night Football. He's been the Commanders' most effective wide receiver against zone coverage, even more so versus man. The Cowboys have played man and zone coverages at league average rates this season. They've allowed 15.6 yards per reception while in man. That's 30th, and 11.7 yards per reception while in zone. That's 28th. And then they rank below average in first down plus touchdown rate allowed in both coverages. So you look at Terry McLaurin, top 20 mark in fantasy points per route run, and 11th in yards per route run against zone coverage. 1 catch performance in week 11. This should be a great spot for him to bounce back here in week 12.
Quinyon Mitchell, man, he's no joke.
Yeah, that's been such a cute. Yeah, there was like a graphic going around that somebody was comparing him to Darrelle Revis during, you know, his prime when he was shutting all those top wide receivers down. So yeah, that's been a huge thing for that Eagles defense for sure. They've really turned it around. Obviously Cooper DeJean as well has really stepped up since becoming a starter. But yeah, don't have to worry about that as much against the Cowboys. And they obviously got corners injured as well that didn't play last week. So we'll see if they play this week. But man, it's just a nice matchup. So let's talk about some matchups that maybe aren't as nice and go back to the wide receiver cornerback matchup article, Nick, and talk about some wide receivers to avoid this week.
Yeah, number one here, Chicago Bears slot wide receiver Keenan Allen facing Minnesota Vikings new slot defensive back Josh Metellus. Minnesota, just because of the way that they blitz constantly, there is a bit of a balancing act here where one guy hangs back in coverage while the other goes. Last couple of weeks, though, Josh Metellus has been the primary slot defensive back. I still expect Byron Murphy to be involved, blah, blah, blah. But Metellus right now, he's the top dog there in slot coverage. On that blitz note, Keenan Allen also not doing a really great job of earning targets when the offense is blitzed. Minnesota's 50.6% blitz rate ranks first among NFL teams, and Keenan Allen has earned just 30 targets against the blitz, only third most among Chicago's starting wide receivers. DJ Moore is beating him by 16. I just don't think that this is Keenan. He's kind of lost a step, man. It's a bummer. And, there was a bunch of they kind of spotted him being really out of shape. That narrative's kind of gone by the wayside as the whole struggles with the coaching staff and everything's been taken center stage. But anyway, Keenan Allen, I don't like this from a tactics perspective, and his performance did not improve last week under new offensive coordinator Thomas Brown. On the season as a whole, among 39 NFL slot receivers with at least 110 slot receiving snaps, Allen ranks 30th in target rate, 15.3%, 35th in yards per reception, and 38th in drop rate. That's yards per out run, excuse me. And 38th in drop rate, 21.4%. There's something going on here that is too much for you and I to diagnose, but he's just not having a great year. Josh Metellus, among 37 NFL slot defensive backs with at least 130 slot coverage snaps, Metellus ranks 9th in yards allowed per coverage snap, 8th in success rate, 6th in yards allowed per reception, 5th in targeted rate, and 2nd in explosive pass plays allowed rate. He is one of just 5 qualifying slot defensive backs who has not yet missed a tackle. I think he just wraps up Keenan Allen, does not really let anything happen here. It's a huge bummer, but this is a matchup to avoid for me.
Yeah, it definitely feels that way with Keenan Allen. And, the one thing that he has a strength in this season, I found, at least in digging into his data, was that he's been really good against man coverage, hasn't been nearly as good against zone coverage. The Vikings are the most zone heavy team in the NFL. Nobody plays more zone than them, right? So it again just stacks up as another poor matchup here for Keenan Allen. And the defense has actually been pretty good, like you said, Josh Metellus being a nice part of that as well. All right, next name on the list as a name to avoid, wide receiver for the Cleveland Browns, Elijah Moore.
Yeah, facing Pittsburgh Steelers slot defensive back Beanie Bishop. Beanie Bishop, dude, good for you, man. Undrafted free agent rookie, having a heck of a year. Ranks 3rd in interceptions per coverage target, 24th in forced incompletion rate, ties for 12th in yards allowed per coverage snap, 15th in open target rate, and 12th in success rate. Dude is already an upper third starter slot cornerback. Super cool. I am really pumped to see this guy's career. As for Elijah Moore, he is earning targets, but he's just not really doing a lot. Like earning targets, that is with Jameis under center, but it's ranks 33rd in yards per out run this season, 35th in yards after the catch per reception, 36th in drop rate, is 55.3 PFF slot receiving grade, ranks 5th worst among 39 NFL slot wide receivers with at least 110 slot receiving snaps. It's just not great. What really stood out to me was the yards after catch per reception. This dude is kind of, a slippery post catch guy, and he's not getting the job done in that regard. He maybe could survive on volume and the bye weeks and finishes like the wide receiver 35 or something. But I think his lackluster showings coupled with Beanie and the Cleveland coaching staff, they might shove Dorian Thompson-Robinson in there, to get his name right, DTR. If Jameis keeps throwing these interceptions, it's a little unnerving. We love Jameis for fantasy purposes, but this just seems very uncertain here.
Yeah, it's a scary matchup, considering that Browns offensive line and how poor they've been, and they could potentially be without Jedrick Wills this week. They're going to be starting Jermaine Ifedi at left tackle as well. Like, you got TJ Watt and Nick Herbig, who's a backup to Alex Highsmith, but Nick Herbig is really damn good as a pass rusher. And he's going to play a ton against Jermaine Ifedi. Like, that's still like another thing that you just have to be worried about. Then you add Cam Hayward into the mix, who doesn't matter how old he is, the guy's just a game wrecker in the middle of the defensive line. So there's so much to be concerned about for this Browns offense this week. I'm looking to avoid this group as well. Like, all of their wide receivers rank outside the top 75 in fantasy points per route run against zone coverage with sub 17% target rates. The Steelers play zone coverage at a top 10 rate. They rank above average in most team zone coverage metrics as well, including 6th best in first down plus touchdown rate allowed and 9th in defensive success rate. So yeah, it feels like a poor matchup for Cleveland, but we'll find out soon enough. They play tonight against the Pittsburgh Steelers. So the last name on the list is also in this Thursday night football game that you have. Tell us about the Calvin Austin versus Greg Newsome matchup.
Yeah, I also just don't like the short week stuff. This seems like a very run heavy affair here. So Calvin Austin, he really flashes at times. He's clearly a good route runner, but he might just be too friggin' small for the NFL. Really don't love the way that he has panned out in Mike Williams' first 2 weeks, which thanks a lot, Mike. I did start him, fantasy folks, so I lost with you last week. But anyway, Calvin Austin not succeeding with the new guy in fold, even though the new guy has only done one thing on one reception. Calvin Austin, among 39 NFL slot receivers with at least 110 slot receiving snaps, Austin ranks 25th or worse in target rate, catch rate, yards per out run, and yards after the catch per reception. Conversely, Cleveland Browns cornerback Greg Newsome ranks 10th in catch rate allowed, 6th in open target rate, and 3rd in forced in completion rate. I think he's just going to bully Calvin Austin tonight. This is a matchup to avoid.
Yep. No, makes sense. And I put a couple names here to avoid as well, just from the wide receiver man zone report. And again, I didn't want to put too many names again, because we might not have the options to replace them. So I wanted to highlight at least 2 that are bigger names that I would consider outside the top 36 right now. And the first one being Michael Pittman Jr. of the Indianapolis Colts. He's had the least amount of success among this Colts receiving core versus man coverage, seeing just a 14% target rate. And he's going up against the Detroit Lions, who play man coverage at the highest rate in the NFL. And they rank in the top 5 in first down plus touchdown rate allowed and defensive success rate. So I'm avoiding Michael Pittman this week. The other name that I'm frustrated with, and part of the reason, I want to sit him and move him outside top 36, is Jalen Waddle of the Miami Dolphins. He has managed just 0.32 fantasy points per route run against against man coverage, and that ranks tied for 65th among 129 qualifying wide receivers who have run at least 25 routes. He's managed just a 14.5% target rate. The Patriots are the matchup this week, and they do play man coverage at the second highest rate this season, just behind the Lions, and they rank among the 10 best man defenses in yards allowed per coverage target and completion rate allowed. So Jalen Waddle, it's been a disappointing season. I know part of that was Tua being gone, but it hasn't really turned around with Tua in the lineup. So I don't expect it to turn around this week. I'm avoiding him where possible this week. Okay, we'll go on to the other positions here. But first, a quick shout out from our friends at Fabric by Gerber Life. As parents, we do everything we can to set up our kids for a successful future, academics, team sports, college admissions. But what about getting started financially when they're out on their own? Fabric makes it easy for you to set up an investment account for your child now that grows with them and helps prepare for their financial future. Funds can be used for nearly anything benefiting your child, from tuition and books to summer camps and after-school activities. And when they're adults, they can use the funds for their first home, new car, or even to start a business. It's all online, and setting up an account could take you just 5 minutes. Get started started investing with as little as $1 a day, then manage your child's account and monitor their investments right from your phone. There are no contribution limits, multiple tax advantages, and they're SIPC insured up to $500,000, plus no commission fees and just a low flat monthly maintenance fee. You can share your child's unique gifting link with family and friends. So instead of them gifting things they'll outgrow for birthdays and special occasions, they can help grow your child's investments instead. Fabric has partnered with Gerber Life, trusted by millions of families like yours for over 50 years. Join the thousands of parents who trust Fabric to help protect their family. Start investing in your child today at meetfabric.com/fantasy. That's meetfabric.com/fantasy, meetfabric.com/fantasy. This is a paid promotion for the Fabric UGMA product and not for investment advisory services. Portfolios managed by Fort Washington Investment Advisors, Inc. Custodial services provided by Apex Clearing Corporation. All investing is subject to risk. Terms apply. Learn more at meetfabric.com. Okay, let's talk about some running backs now. And the first name that I put on the list was from the O-line D-line matchup article. I went with Tyrone Tracy of the New York Giants, who I think has the top 12 potential this week. He's fully taken over the Giants backfield. Even with the change at quarterback, there shouldn't be I think a major concern about his ability to produce, considering what he's proven so far this season. So since week 5, when given at least 1 yard before contact, Tracy has earned a 90.0 rushing grade that ranks 13th among 37 qualifiers. His 7.9 yards per carry is also the 5th best mark among those same qualifiers. And there is definitely an advantage in the trenches here because Tampa Bay is allowing 1.5 rushing yards before contact per attempt. That ranks 25th. The Giants' offensive line has generated 1.4 rushing yards per attempt, which is tied for the 6th best mark. And Tampa Bay also allowing the 6th most fantasy points per game to opposing running backs. So ideal scenario here for Tyrone Tracy, who has dominated the touches in New York as of late. And pulled from Nate's Start Sit article as well for another name here. And Nate has chosen Bucky Irving of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers going against the New York Giants. So the same matchup, just on the other side of the ball. And Irving, Nate, as Nate notes, him and Rachaad White have settled into kind of a two-man rotation for the Buccaneers, who have lost 3 of their past 4 games, all to the Ravens, the Chiefs, and the 49ers. So Nate mentions that those game scripts obviously led to White playing more than Irving. But regardless of the game script, Irving is one of the one receiving the most carries either way. But Tampa Bay should be running the ball a little bit more here when they're winning. They're playing the 2-10 Giants, obviously. They're 5.5-point favorites, Tampa Bay. Giants have allowed the 4th most rushing yards per game, while Bucky Irving has scored the 24th most fantasy points per game among running backs since week 7, and will be the first game in a while where he kind of has the chance to take over here and shine, as Nate points out. And then let's go to a couple sits here. Again, keeping in mind with the sits, we might not have better options, but go into the O-line D-line matchup article. I put Ramondre Stevenson of the New England Patriots. So this was a matchup where New England's offensive line is generating just 0.8 rushing yards before contact per attempt. That ranks 30th, while they rank just 25th in run blocking grade. Miami's defensive line has allowed just 0.6 rushing yards before contact per attempt, which is the best mark in the league. Their overall run defense grade ranks 12th, which is a 70.4. And then you look at Ramondre Stevenson, when he's contacted 2 or fewer yards from the line of scrimmage, he's averaging just 2.7 yards per carry. That ranks 29th among 50 qualifying running backs, 55.2 rushing grade in those situations. That ranks 42nd among the same 50 qualifying running backs. And his 2.8 yards after contact per attempt ranks just 31st in those situations. So again, it's a week where 6 teams are on a bye. It's always difficult to kind of, really strongly suggest players to be avoided, but, just being aware of who you're maybe choosing to replace Stevenson if you are looking to move him in your lineup. But if you can afford to bench him, it's one of those matchups where I'd look to avoid him if possible. And then the last name on the list here, also from Nate's Start Sit article, is Nick Chubb of the Cleveland Browns going against the Pittsburgh Steelers tonight. So I know Nate was, optimistic about Chubb last week, but after kind of seeing it here, and it just hasn't looked the same, right? He's played 4 games now since returning from injury, has yet to finish among the top 24 fantasy running backs. And then Nate notes his role, which doesn't include third downs, 2-minute drills, or much passing work. He's has restricted his fantasy potential, but his talent has always kind of allowed him to overcome that in prior seasons. But this season, obviously coming off injury, we should have expected, or we did expect him to not be the same person, the same player. He's averaging just 3.1 yards per carry. He was averaging 5+ yards per carry in each of his first 6 seasons. The Browns, obviously, their game scripts generally aren't favorable to him, that allow him to kind of run the ball a ton. Jerome Ford mixed in a bit on early downs and passing downs this past week. And then you look at the strength of schedule tool, the Browns have the 3rd worst matchup for running backs this week against the Steelers, who are allowing 90.8 rushing yards per game, 4th lowest average for defense this season. So as Nate notes, Chubb unlikely to have the efficiency or volume to be a fantasy starter this week.
Yeah, they're also not incentivized to play this guy, given the way that the season is unfold. It's a huge bummer, but yeah, I think this is the right read.
Yeah. All right. So that is our sits for running back, wide receiver, tight end, and quarterback. So let's look at our waiver wire discussion or just general discussion area here, Nick. It's turned into, just some interesting points heading into the week. So what was the discussion point you wanted to highlight this week?
So this one, I mean, we're probably going to end up talking about the whole offense here, but Carolina Panthers offer fantasy managers a point of significant confusion now in their post bye world. So Adam Thielen probably coming back. Does that mean Jalen Coker remains in the slot? Is he going to be pushed to the outside? I know what I would do. I would develop the young guy, but I don't know. Dave Canales has done some kind of funky stuff this year, so I don't know how to read that. Xavier Legette, I was very down on him in the pre-draft process. I am now I consider him like a coin flip as to whether or not he's going to be a good NFL player, which is a significant increase from where I was at. We've also got Jonathan Brooks potentially making his NFL debut this week. The reason I find that to be a worthwhile discussion, I put in the notes, to pull back the curtain there, I put in the notes that we need to talk about the wide receivers, but he could be part of the passing game. This offense could look a lot different this week, and they are certainly going to be playing in a pass-heavy game script, probably trailing Kansas City by 12 or 14 points or something. Looking at the Kansas City secondary, the big thing that jumps off the page is that they've lost unheralded number 2 cornerback Jalen Watson to injured reserve. I do think that Watson will be a household name. The Kansas City Chiefs did a very good job drafting their long-term cornerback unit so that they can allow they do a great job. Anyway, I've talked about this on the podcast before. Jalen Watson is a great player. With that, they use a multi-pronged approach to the number 2 perimeter cornerback role. And when Trent McDuffie is not in the slot, they use 3 different safeties in covering the slot receiver. It's a very complex situation. The way I guess that I think that I would probably attack this wide receiver core this week is that if you are in need of a big play guy, like you're not in a good spot and you're hit really hard by the buys, if you're swinging for the fences, the move is probably Xavier Legette. I think Trent McDuffie will largely stick to Adam Thielen, no matter if he's on the outside or in the slot on a majority of snaps. As for Jalen Coker, I think that Trent McDuffie's likely assignment, the Thielen assignment, should free up Coker to do his thing either in the slot or maybe working from the perimeter. But Xavier Legette, you start him if you were in a bad situation. Adam Thielen, I don't think I'm starting at all. Jalen Coker, man, is he a wide receiver 4 this week? I turn it over to you, and then we can touch on Brooks really briefly. But what do you think of all that?
Yeah, I mean, I said it on the waiver wire show. Like, if Carolina decides that they're going to play Adam Thielen over Jalen Coker, I'm going to be pretty pissed, just because I think you can argue that, Coker has shown the most promise in this wide receiver core with, like, the best receiving grade, best yards per run, best target rate, all the underlying metrics that matter. Coker's been the best on the team, and he's not pushing 60 years old like Adam Thielen. So it only makes sense that they kind of continue to utilize their youth in a year where, like you said, maybe they have an outside shot at making the playoffs. But let's be honest, they're not going to beat the Chiefs this week, and that playoff shot's going to go away pretty quickly, right? So they're not winning anything this year. So what does rolling out Adam Thielen accomplish? Nothing really, right? It doesn't accomplish anything for your future. So for me, I'm with you. I'm not playing Adam Thielen this week. I'm worried if Adam Thielen is active for this game, what it does to Jalen Coker if he cuts into his snap share at the very least, whether with the potential to even play over him completely. So with those two guys, I kind of want to wait and see if you can afford it. But yeah, I think Xavier Legette, if there's anybody in this matchup that maybe has a chance to kind of do anything, it's probably him. Going against the Chiefs, they're a good defense, man-heavy defense. Legette has at least found the most success against man coverage for this team. But yeah, he's probably the safest bet, I think, Legette. But yeah, it's a matchup that, like you said, the Carolina offense could look very different this week, especially with Jonathan Brooks, I think, being eased in. I don't think he's going to take over Chuba Hubbard's role or anything like that. They've obviously shown that they're easing him in all season. It's week 12. The guy's finally making his debut, right? So I don't expect him to necessarily come in and be a starter right away. That would be crazy if he did. And I mean, I'd love to be proven wrong there, but I also really like Chuba Hubbard, so I don't know where to go with those guys either. So I think Legette's just the safest one of the bunch, really. So.
I even safe might be the wrong way to phrase. Like, sure, he could finish with like 0 catches, and I would not be surprised. Yeah. But if someone's going to house one, it's probably that guy.
Right.
I bet Coker finishes as the most efficient receiver on a per route basis, but he's probably going to be relegated to 3 receiver sets, and he's not going to do a whole lot with it. I totally agree with Jonathan Brooks. I'm sure they're going to put Chuba Hubbard out there. Jonathan Brooks, he might be on the field for like 6 snaps or something. Right. I probably have to start him in one league, and I am dreading it. If they're gonna ease him in, throwing him checkdowns in a blowout loss is a fine way to do it. So maybe he gets 6 PPR points. I don't know. To those looking to start Jonathan Brooks, I think it's going to be bad.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of the role, right? Like that if you're looking at him and hoping for anything, and I think if you're the Panthers as well, like I know Chuba Hubbard's been a little bit involved in the passing game, but he's not very effective in that role, right? So if they're looking for a potential upgrade there, maybe that's Brooks, and maybe Hubbard can still handle the early down work, but who knows how much opportunity they'll have to run the ball in this game against a very good team, obviously in Kansas City. So yeah, I'm having to start Chuba Hubbard again because we don't have options. And I'm going to start him in that, probably low end RB2, treat him as that kind of thing and hope for the best, but not excited about it at all here. Okay, let's close her out here with our defense special team streamers of the week. Nick, who do you like this week?
Yeah, Washington Commanders defense special teams versus the Dallas Cowboys. Cowboys starting Cooper Rush again. I think last week probably more accurately reflected what Rush can do, but I mean that in the best and the worst of senses. Commanders defense, they've really turned things around over the last few weeks. I broke down their weeks 7 through 11 pass defense data. 3rd in EPA allowed per play, 8th in success rate, 6th in PFF coverage grade, 7th in catch rate allowed, 3rd in yards allowed per coverage snap, 4th in quarterback pressure rate, 10th in NFL sacks. It's a all-out great unit right now. And the Dallas Cowboys offense, I think if you're chasing the Brandon Cooks potential return, I'm not interested in it. CeeDee Lamb was a late add to the injury report with a back injury last week. Now he's on the injury report with a foot and a back injury. at some point they need to put him in bubble wrap and not let him go tear his ACL in week 16 in a meaningless friggin' game. I like Washington Commanders defense a lot. As for the second one, Tampa Bay Buccaneers at New York Giants. You already broke down a lot of the Giants' offensive stuff. We think that Tyrone Tracy will be fine, but outside of that, could be kind of tough sledding. Tampa Bay's defense, very similar to the Minnesota Vikings in terms of tactics. They're number 3 in total blitzes. They're second in blitz rate, 6th in quarterback pressure rate, 10th in NFL sacks. They're just gonna throw the heat at the New York Giants passing offense, and I expect them to return value. The Tampa Bay defense, Tampa Bay is, as a whole, has a really good schedule from here on out. So if their talent is maybe a little bit in question, or they've had some ups and downs. They've had some really, really, really bad injury luck, but I think that given the matchups, they're going to be able to get it done as a DST unit more weeks than not from here on out. Their offensive players are also significantly on the rise. But I would call Tampa Bay a process related defense where they're going to have opportunities to beat up on lesser teams. Their defensive injury issues are a little bit concerning, but like, I do think that fantasy managers should be, what we are looking for every week is which defense can score a touchdown. And this defense is going to be one that scores touchdowns as the season closes out, as will the Washington Commanders, I think, this week. We like those interceptions. We like those fumble recoveries. Both of these teams are probably top 6 units this week.
Yeah, no, I like it. And Tampa Bay potentially getting, it looks like Jamel Dean back as well, one of their starting outside corners who's been great. So that should really help their coverage unit. And yeah, Washington. I mean, look, we talked about the Texans versus Dallas last week, right? Houston finished as the overall top defense special team streamer against Cooper Rush and company. I know, the Commanders don't have like a Danielle Hunter or anything like that on their defensive line, but it's a Dan Quinn revenge game as well. They got along with Durance Armstrong and Dante Fowler, who played with Dallas last year. So these guys might be motivated. Going against Cooper Rush, they're going to have to pass a lot again. There's going to be opportunities for sacks. Cooper Rush 4 turnover worthy plays last week, which included like 2 fumbles and an interception. So yeah, love the opportunity here for both these defenses. Nice show.
Good stuff, John.
All right, let's wrap it up here. That's going to do it for us today. Thank you all for tuning in. As always, again, if you'd feel free to like and subscribe to the YouTube channel if you haven't already, or leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. We greatly appreciate the support there. Nic, again, huge thank you to you as well. Great job. And before you go, please do remind everybody what you have going on at pff.com this week.
QB defense streamers on Tuesday, pass run funnel report on Wednesday, wide receiver cornerback matchups, target and avoid on Thursday.
Yes, sir. And then for me, O-line, D-line matchup article will be out tomorrow. And then we got the wide receiver man zone coverage report article is out today. It's out right now, as well as the IDP rankings article, IDP fantasy report, Nate's rankings, Nate's start sit article, and his recap articles, all on pff.com. So get a PFF Plus subscription and you'll get access to all of that stuff. Good luck to everybody in week 12. Hopefully you survive this bye week nightmare. And until next time, peace out.